My name's Laura Purse. I am class of 2003, and I am honored to be here as the president of the Alumni Association, and particularly honored to be standing here in this role this year. 125 years is quite the milestone, and I feel very lucky to be celebrating with all of you. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what the Alumni Association is, who we are, what we do, and then I'm going to put you to work. So just a quick overview of the 125th, which has been the focus of our efforts this year. We have been celebrating this very special year, culminating in this weekend. The celebrations have been quite plentiful, and Tim and Melissa have really been racking up the frequent flyer miles. They have been all over the country and the globe celebrating. We've had 24 events so far, and this happens to be our 25th. This weekend is our largest, as you might imagine, and we are adding over 600 people to that bottom line there in terms of the number of Griffins who will have celebrated and participated in this celebration. So this is what brings me here before you today. The Alumni Association is a community of people that's available to all of you. You are a part of it. And the Alumni Association Executive Council, which I will refer to as the AAC from here on out, is the sort of leadership group of that body. What we do as an AAC is we work on your behalf to connect alumni with each other and with the school. And we've been working really hard in the last 2 years to sort of identify what it is and how it is that we're moving people to increase their connectivity with Pomfret. So I have this great little pyramid that we've put together. We're trying to sort of increase the number of people who are part of the fun. And if you can see the top portion of the pyramid here, you'll see that we have donors, volunteers, event attendees. That's where the fun is happening. And then we have this big group of people at the bottom who are aware of what's going on at Pomfret. They have a sense of what's going on, but they're maybe not necessarily aware of how much fun we're all having at the top of the pyramid. Right? We're all here. And so what we've been trying to do is encourage people to participate in the events, the volunteering, the trips to Mexico. You heard about Giving Day, right? And all of the great things that are happening here on campus. We want as many people as possible a part of the action. So who is on this AAC, this group of people? There's 32 of us, and if you look at this list, you can probably see someone that you know. We span 6 decades. We are all over the country, and we are really fortunate to have great leadership in our vice presidents, Dan Thompson, Jim Seymour, and Secretary Sarah Howie. It's a really dynamic group, and I'm thrilled that we get to all be here this weekend to celebrate with you. So here is our mission. So our mission is to bring Pomfret School alumni to bring together Pomfret School alumni to advance the interests and promote the welfare of Pomfret School and its alumni and foster closer relations among them. This mission conveniently falls under one of the pillars of the strategic plan that Tim and many others have spent a lot of time putting together. And so we're aligned with this idea of creating sort of lifelong Griffins. So going back to my little pyramid for a second, all of this basically means that if you sort of break down the numbers, we have over 4,500 contactable alumni. Of those, just over 2,000 are connected. They're volunteers, they're event attendees, they're donors, which means that we have this number here, 2,764 alums who are people who we are actively out trying to reach and engage and get them excited about all the great things happening on campus and beyond. So I'm assuming you want to know how we're doing this. I love it. So first and foremost, we have fun. We have events that happen throughout the country and the world. There are so many great things happening on this campus, and Tim is going to tell you about them a little bit later. But attending an event is hands down, far and away, the best way to not only connect with your fellow alums, but learn about what's happening right here. We also give back. We facilitate opportunities for alumni to come back to campus throughout the year and connect with students. One of our signature programs is Career Expo. It's where we have 40 alumni come back to campus and share about themselves and their career journeys. We've found that most people really love talking about themselves and the students like listening, so it's a really nice sort of merging of interests. These sessions have evolved over the years, and we now have an open networking session that participates, so the students are able to really start to sort of grasp what networking looks like and oftentimes end up leaving with their very first career mentor. Other on-campus programs that we participate in are the Quest programs, Pomfret Alumni Teach, getting people with expertise into the classroom to be sort of advisors and share their expertise and knowledge. Off campus, our class agents are active with the annual fund. We have a series of events that happen throughout the country and the world. Some alums even help with admissions at school fairs. And we have a great career mentoring program that we're actually in the process of growing. So this is where you get to do your work. So against typical convention, I am going to request that you all take a moment and pull out your cell phones. So this is pomfretconnect.org. This is our platform for connecting as an alumni community, and I want all of you to be on it in like the next 5 minutes or so. And not only do I want you to be on it, but I want you to share it with 2 of your friends who for some reason decided that they didn't need to be in this session right now. I'm gonna give you a few minutes. You can sign up through LinkedIn, you can sign up through Facebook, you can use your email. I used LinkedIn, it was very easy. I know it's Saturday, I know you thought that you had the day off. In fact, if you don't do this, you might end up like Jeff Oppenheim in the back over there and get left behind. Just kidding, he didn't actually get left behind because then you'll see him in the front row, right here on the left. He made it. So I know you're all asking, how can I help? You can attend events. You can promote the events that are happening to your friends. You can join our career mentoring program. Thank you, you've all just done that. You can nominate alumni, faculty, and coaches for awards. The awards that are given out over this weekend are channeled through the Alumni Association, and we are constantly looking for great, talented nominees from our pool of alumni. And lastly, do you want to be more involved in what we're doing? Does this sound fun? We are always looking for new AAC members, and if you happen to be interested, I ask that you find Sarah, Dan, or Jim, or I throughout the weekend, or any other AAC members, and chat with them about what it's like to be a part of the AAC and if it might be a great fit for you. So before I close, are there any questions that I can answer from anyone? Great. I am now thrilled to pass the stage to Tim, who is going to share in detail all of the wonderful things that are happening on this campus, the things that make me really proud to be a part of the Pomfret community. So, thank you.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Yes, no? Good. Whoa. Morning, everyone. 17 more minutes of morning. My name's Tim Richards, and if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet or to speak with you this weekend, I do look forward to having that chance over the next 24 hours or so. Over the next 3 or 4 hours, I'm going to talk to you about what's going on here at Pomfret School. That's the amount of time I would need to tell you what's going on at Pomfret School. I promise that you will be able to get lunch well before 3 o'clock this afternoon. I'm going to share as best as I can a pretty broad overview of everything that's been happening at Pomfret. Some of you have been in the audience when I've given similar updates in years past. There is an incredible amount of great stuff that we're doing here at the school on all fronts and on all levels. And so I will try to touch on that as best as I can, while also hoping to leave time for any questions that you may have. Back in 2012, we adopted a strategic plan, and the Pomfret purpose was a dynamic and bold vision for what we wanted Pomfret School to become, what we believed Pomfret School needed to become. It has been for us over the past 6 years, really, we adopted it in 2013, has been a roadmap for us as we've begun to chart and reimagine what Pomfret School can and should be for students. In 2019 now, working with essentially a 6-year-old plan, we are in the process of revising that, of going back in and tweaking and affirming a good deal of what's in there. One of the points about this plan that is remarkable is that after 6 years, the bones of the plan are still remarkably relevant. And so you will see coming this fall to a mailbox or an inbox near you a revised version of what I'm going to be talking about now and sharing with you about the progress that we've made. We have focused perhaps most intentionally in my time on changing culture, on changing school culture, and particularly changing the culture of what it means to be an educator here at Pomfret. I've used this slide, I used that slide a number of times at conferences, both regional and national, that I've presented on in talking about the concept of school change. Very few industries, I've said this many times, have changed as slowly as education. And this, back in 2013, was kind of us, but it was kind of every other school as well. And this is a little bit inflated. But the idea of change is appealing to everyone. The idea of having to change yourself, not so much, and for a good reason. Schools have been sort of the victims of their own success in the past. And so we love the idea of change, but no, I'm pretty good, pretty comfortable doing what I'm doing. In the 6 years since we adopted the plan, we've moved from there really to here. And while this may be mildly hyperbolic, it isn't entirely hyperbolic. That is, the school has become a different organization, an organization where people are thirsty for change. And kids, yes, but more importantly, the faculty and administration constantly pursuing this idea of what can be next, with an eye toward iterative change most of the time, but also at certain moments, transformational change. We're trying to be very careful not to hop on every fad of the day, educational fads and trends. But there's some really good things happening out there. This is kind of an inflection moment for schools, and Pomfret is thoughtfully trying to be in front as we go about that. So as we look at the strategic plan, and I'm going to walk you through, and this is, don't worry about not being able to read everything. This is, where's the pointer? I don't know where the pointer, there's the pointer. This is really what you need to know. The leaders in learning and teaching. Our momentum over the past 6 years has really been focused in that particular area. We have been updating, modernizing our curriculum, our pedagogy, that is our approaches to the classroom. If you've walked around and seen our classrooms or seen our learning spaces, you can see visually that we've made a commitment to change the space. And then I can tell you earnestly that we've been making a significant efforts to change what's going on in the space. We have increased dramatically our professional development. We've increased and improved our opportunities for students with different learning profiles in the Collaborative Learning Center. We've created a makerspace. If you have been on a tour and you've seen our makerspace, you see our commitment to that type of thinking. the Helios Project. If you haven't been over behind the library to check out the Helios Project and all of what that has meant for our students, I would encourage you to do so. There's been a robust effort on the part of the school to diversify what we're doing, and then to change as well, to change our emphasis on what it means to be a student in a classroom today. The notion of, and I was talking with someone yesterday, the notion of teachers just being repositories of information, pouring information into students' heads is one now that is effectively in the past at Pomfret. Any information that students really need, they can get on their phones. And so this idea of dropping information in and having that be the most important part of education is not something we are retaining. We've invested heavily in Project Zero at Harvard Grad School of Education, a way to have teachers help students develop deep and lasting learning. Almost 50% of our faculty have gone through that program. We dropped our advanced placement program. I've been telling audiences now for 4 years that we dropped our advanced placement program, again, in the name of moving forward and being a little bit more progressive. We have completely reimagined our 9th grade curriculum as a way of creating scaffolding for the exploration that is to come after the 9th and 10th grades. And this year, a year where we were supposed to slow down, we were supposed to spend a year consolidating. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but the Grauer Institute for Excellence and Innovation has been in existence for 5 years. The inaugural director, Jamie Baker, left after last year, and so this year was a year to pause and to reflect, consolidate, really spend some time doubling down on the initiatives that we've introduced. And so without any administrative push, we're introducing 40 new classes next year, 40. That is reflective of the change in culture that I'm really, really excited about. We're not adding 40 on top of everything else. We'll take away some courses that aren't as relevant anymore, but much more in terms of interdisciplinary work, many more collaborations between departments. Really exciting. And then finally on this slide, you see here comprehensive college, or you can't see here, comprehensive college and career programs. Next year, we will be introducing our 4-year college curriculum for our students. So no longer will students start the college counseling process partway through their junior year. That will begin in their freshman year, so that by the time they become 11th graders, sort of the mystique and the fear and the mystery of what is the college process can be softened for them. And if you haven't seen the roadmap, we have a beautiful new in-house designed roadmap for our college program. I would encourage you to take a look. So some exciting initiatives there. In terms of boarding school, being a distinctive boarding school, it's pretty clear that our number one competitor when we're looking at students is staying at home. The second, that is not going to boarding school, the second most obvious competitor for us is other schools. So we are seeking to distinguish ourselves with respect to our program, not just on the academic front, and clearly that's been where our greatest emphasis has been, and for very good reasons, but also in terms of our co-curricular programming. And we have made, as you'll see, and if you walk around and talk to people, you'll see, some really significant commitments to our co-curricular program. So we don't have Saturday classes anymore. We haven't for some time. But in place of Saturday classes, we have an incredibly thoughtfully curated and crafted co-curricular program called our QUEST program. And QUEST is an acronym standing for Question, Understand, Engage, Share, and Transition. And the pillars of that, social justice and diversity, which is an area we have been giving an incredible amount of attention to, health and wellness, character and leadership, and then next year we're introducing a whole new resilience curriculum. And again, some people may say, well, resilience is the fad word of the day in education. Research suggests that it's something else, that it's something more permanent, more lasting, more enduring, and something that schools should be doing more intentionally. And so we do that on Saturdays for 2 hours, about 15 times a year, with a great deal of student leadership. So that's been a really, really positive change. In terms of healthy habits, There's a new white building off to my right, to your left. The health center, I think, speaks to our commitment to student health and well-being. Last night, if you were at dinner, on the second floor of the field house, we have a new yoga studio, which speaks to our commitment to student mental health and well-being. We have a new sophomore health and wellness class every sophomore takes. It's part of our Quest program. We've taught courses in MBSR, which is mindfulness-based stress reduction classes. We have vastly improved our policies to protect and ensure the safety of all of our students. And we regularly do tabletop exercises to explore what we would do in the event of. And most recently, about a month ago, we did a tabletop exercise on active shooter on campus, which is something we hope will never happen, but sadly in our world, it is happening too often. Lifelong engagement, I won't double down here. I think Laura did a fantastic job talking about the work that we've committed to engaging our alums and engaging, most importantly, engaging our alums with our students. And the work that the alumni is doing amongst themselves is fantastic. And my daughter, who's a senior in college, has been the beneficiary of developing some great networking relationships with Pomfret alums. But the connections that we're developing between students and alums has really been a powerful transition for us. And the work that Paul Fowler and George Santiago and Laura have done in their roles as the presidents of the AAEC over the last 8 years has really transformed that. So we're incredibly proud of that. Measurements of achievement, and I'm going really fast, and I apologize. If you have questions, raise your hand, stop me. I will stop if I see a hand. We've begun to join the throngs of industries, and schools are, again, getting there a little bit more slowly, who are making intentional use of data to inform what we're doing. We created a position this year, a part-time position. Our math department chair is sort of the coordinator of institutional data and helping us do some research, looking at our practices through admissions and alumni. And you'll be hearing more about this in really weeks to come. You'll be all receiving a survey about your experiences. I'll talk more about that in just a minute. In terms of forward-looking assessments, and Don Gibbs spoke a little bit about this yesterday at his presentation. The school has joined something called the Mastery Transcript Consortium. Raise your hand if you've heard of the MTC. One. Oh, wow, lots of hands. That's great. The Mastery Transcript Consortium is a group now of about 220 schools and leading schools, both independent schools and public schools across the country, that are aiming to redesign what the college-bound high school transcript should look like. Right now, the transcript is pretty much the same as it was when you were here. There are SATs or ACTs, sometimes there are subject test scores, and then there are grades. There's a grade transcript, A's, B's, C's, D's, and in our case, E's. Not too many of those, I hope, but they exist. We believe, I should say, Scott Looney, who is the founder of this consortium, believed that there's a really better way to show colleges what our students' learning looks like. I recently read a study that 51% of all grades offered in American high schools are A's. 51%. So how distinctive is it to have A's in something? Not really distinctive. Increasing number of schools aren't looking at standardized tests. At least 25% of colleges in America no longer require standardized testing. So how are they making choices? So the Mastery Transcript Consortium, the idea is to move away from a grade-based transcript and to move to a skills-based transcript, to provide information to colleges about a particular student's socio-emotional learning. How creative are they? How collaborative are they? What's their critical thinking look like? How do they communicate through different means? But not doing it through the lens of grades, but rather through rubrics that define what good, excellent, or outstanding performance looks like in one of those areas. So we've begun adopting some experimental steps with the Mastery Transcript idea this year. Our 9th grade humanities program didn't have any grades in the fall. It was all of the assessment was based on rubrics that the department had developed. And in Project Pomfret this winter, every student received a Mastery Transcript Consortium-like assessment that will go full-time and on their permanent transcript. So we're doing some really interesting work there. In terms of looking at methodology and assessing faculty, we're doing okay. We're not doing great. We moved away about 4 years ago from sort of an old school model of assessing our faculty because I sensed that the tool we were using wasn't very effective. It wasn't really guiding faculty towards improvement. Instead, it ended up being a compliment fest. These are all the things that we're doing really well with no suggestions about how we might do things better. So a few years ago, we moved to a Folio collaborative school. It's an online platform that we use. A lot of self-reflection and individual goal setting that every faculty member does. I do it for the board. Every one of my direct reports has a Folio platform. They fill out goals. We have conversations through the years. It's all focused on professional growth. It's been good without being great. Our usage has been a little bit inconsistent. It's our hope and plan next year to begin to figure out what it could mean to combine Folio with a more robust self-assessment and then peer assessment evaluation process. And then, as I mentioned, you'll be getting a survey in the mail as we look to ask you, Mr. Malarkey.
Yes.
Yes.
Tim, how has the faculty embraced having to give more of an assessment on the students, versus a 90 is an A, and
Yeah.
that's very easy for the faculty member. How have they embraced that?
So it's a little hard initially to wrap your head around, but I don't have a slide here on it, and I could show you. I could show anyone who's curious what the rubric, for example, looks like. And I say that as a means of explaining when you have a really carefully crafted rubric, assessing becomes quite easy. There is actually a fair amount of arbitrariness in grade assignation, as they say. If you take a department of 10 faculty members and ask them all to grade an essay, there's very little that suggests, any research that suggests that everyone's going to give that an 88, right? It's going to range from a 75 to a 97, even though the teachers all have sort of agreements about what looks good. So that the advantage of the skills-based assessment with a really carefully crafted rubric is that you can point to specific behaviors that would suggest that this person is still in the sort of developmental stage, this person's in the participation stage, this person's a real contributor, or this person's excelling, basically because you can define clearly what it looks like to excel. So I think I would encourage people to find folks who are in the Humanities 1 and 2 program and talk to them about what it felt like. Our sense is that it was a really good start, but I've been teaching for 34 years. I'm teaching again this spring. It's awesome. I'm not good anymore, I found out, but that's okay. But I, in talking with Tim Deary, whom you heard talking in chapel, he's really helped me rethink about, how we go about assigning grades, and it's much less quantitative than I used to think it was. There's a lot of qualifying that happens. There's another question back here. No? Yes.
Tim, it just strikes me, and as you know, I still teach children, that when you have a rubric, and no matter how specific you are, you're still dividing this student from that student
Yep.
into some kind of classification.
Right.
Which, to me, in my brain, suggests 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or
Sure.
some assignable number or performance expectation.
Right. So
To me, that's a grade.
yes and no, right? Because when you talk about a grade in history, what does a B+ in history tell a college admission officer? We're not sure, but what is a sort of a high contributor in collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity suggest, right? Where are those gaps between outstanding? And you can, when we share rubrics with colleges, which we will, and by the way, colleges aren't really quite thirsty for this yet, as you can imagine. But there are high schools all over America that have not had grades for years. So the idea is that at least we're speaking specifically to skills and not to an arbitrary, like a B doesn't tell the admission office anything about how that B was arrived at. But a ranking system on creativity or compassion or commitment or excellence in communication suggests something very clearly to those, we believe, to the college offices. We're still a ways away from having this done. This won't be happening at Pomfret for probably 5 more years. There's a lot of work that's got to go in before this becomes permanently part of what we do. I am convinced, 100% convinced, that this is a necessary direction for schools to go in. Yeah.
Jim, you spoke earlier about grade inflation. You talked about 50% of people getting A's. Although I might understand rubrics, of course it all depends on whether we have the same inflation in rubrics. Everybody is collaborative, everybody is contributory. Ultimately, we need ranking. We need to distinguish more collaborative versus less collaborative. So how do you make those changes so that the colleges have some sense?
So, and again, I sort of wish I'd put, you can actually sense a little bit here, right? So this is an early beta of what a possible MTC transcript could look like. And you can't really see this. Let me see if I can even read it. Integrity, boy, this is really fuzzy. Something and I can't even read that, and I apologize. But you can see that the idea is, in this particular area, whatever this may say, this person is excelling relative to peers from Pomfret. And colleges compare students not firstly against other students from the same schools who are applying, and then they compare them to the masses. Part of the MTC, and we're spending a lot of time here, and I know I've got to jump ahead. Part of the MTC's expectation is that every school will define their own rubrics. Whoa, colleges are going to say. We're going to be comparing apples and oranges. There will be some overlap, some similarities. There are largely agreed upon skills that we think within the consortium are things that we should be concentrating on with students. Different schools will articulate it somewhat differently, but I believe, so this person excels here. This is an area where in area 1, they haven't quite gotten to where they need to be according to our rubrics. It will be an easy visual for colleges to see, and then there will be a fair amount of data that will lie below mostly in terms of narrative. Okay, sorry, we got a little sidetracked. It's an important sidetrack for us though. Let's see. Okay, and then the last side of or the last pillar of the strategic plan has been our focus on long-term success. And we've worked hard and mostly behind the scenes on this page and these goals within the strategic plan. We have recently realigned all of our marketing materials to support the needs of the admission office, particularly as we're out looking for mission-appropriate kids, and to better address through our marketing materials what families and what students are looking for in Pomfret. We've done a deep dive into our finances to look at this question of a sustainable financial model. A couple of years ago, we worked with a guy named Bill Cummel, who's the chief partner of Rational Partners, who came and helped us really dig down into our finances and start pressing us, pushing us to look for solutions to what are some incredibly complex financial questions about the boarding school model. We have taken a much more intentional approach to fundraising, and Melissa has realigned her crew to that end. And our efforts really are bearing fruit. In the past 6 years, we've raised over $50 million. Bless you. That's 32% more than we've ever raised in the 6-year period in the school's history. So that's working as we keenly focus on these needs. Hopefully you can see most of this. I just don't want to step off the stage. We run a balanced budget every year, and Ed Griffin, did Ed have to leave? Ed left. Ed Griffin, who is our CFO, conveniently is the assistant golf coach. I think the best job in all of boarding school. But the head coach is unavailable to take the team on an away trip today, so Ed, on a 67-degree sunny day, threw his hand up in the air to volunteer. But Ed has really helped with he had a fantastic predecessor, and Arthur, are you here? Arthur Diaz? No, Arthur Diaz, very sad. Arthur, whom many of you know, who was on our board and a faculty member for a long time. Ed has followed in Arthur's really, really super, uber competent shoes. But you can see where we are in terms of our budget. And we run a very lean operation. One of the great things that Bill Kummel from Rational Partners told us is, you are incredibly efficient, which is good to hear. And he said, maybe at the time when he was with us, he said maybe the most efficient school for your endowment of any school that he's ever worked with, which is good to hear. But our endowment only supports less than 10% of our operational budget. Whereas, a school an hour up the road, Groton, who's got 9 times our endowment, their endowment supports a huge percentage of their operating budget. 76% or thereabouts of our operating budget comes from net tuition revenue. Right there. So we are a tuition-dependent school, and we continue to be. One of our aims as we move forward is to try to offset that. One of our goals, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, of our campaign is to increase financial aid. But we've been very effective here at keeping our costs reasonable, at doing more with less. If you spend some time on campus, you'll see perhaps what we've done. And Mark Simon, is Mark, you here? Mark Simon, class of 64, helped us do a fantastic master plan for 2015? I think it was 2015. And it really drove us to think deeply about some core areas of campus that needed attention. And we had some great suggestions. We said, okay, we need to really redo our dining hall. But the full cost of that was going to be, I think, about $2.3 million. And instead of taking that approach, we took the let's do more for less approach, and we did massive renovations to the dining hall for about 20% of that. Same for a lovely redo of the school building that we were going to do that was going to cost a couple $1 million. But instead, we redid every classroom at the school and modernized them for about $250,000. We've been really, really thoughtful over the years to try to find solutions to some of these really expensive issues that we're facing through non-traditional means, and we've had some great success. So as we talk about celebrating success, one of the big elephants in the room is this idea of tuition and tuition growth. When I came to Pomfret, we were the second or third most expensive boarding school in New England. We're now, next year, we will be the 19th. This is out of 40 schools, actually the ABOP schools. We were 20th last year. We slipped a notch this year. But we've really been working to control tuition growth. But you can see, and if there are any finance people in here, that our average rate of increase of 3.38% still is outpacing CPI and still is an issue for us. We are working hard to slow that down, but you all know the competing demands of insurance increases and natural resource costs that we don't have any control of. We are making progress. You can see here that the endowment is making significant progress. We were, for a long time here, we're kind of flat. Something happened here that caused this to be able to happen, or was at least partially responsible for this happening. For many years, the school had used the Board of Trustees, a subgroup of the Board of Trustees, as the investment management team. And we made a decision about 4 years ago to hire professional advisors and managers of our money. And 2 years ago, we finally gave them discretion, and wow, things got much better. This isn't throwing our board under the bus, but those are full-time employees doing, they're working full-time and doing the management piece on the side, and using LVW, a really boutique firm in New York that's been terrific for us. They've gotten us out of some legacy positions. We've decreased our cash positions, and when we do those things, you can see that we made real progress. And we had been clearly, but again, even relative to our peers, right, we're making progress. We had been laboring sort of in the bottom, about 3 or 4 schools in terms of percentage increase amongst the ABOP schools in endowment increase year over year. And this year, we were one better than the middle of the pack. So significant, we went from 37th in endowment growth to I think 19th. And everyone had the same market. We just were being a little bit better in terms of how we were managing our funds. We've also reduced our endowment draw from 4.75% to 4.5%. We would love to get it down to 4.25%, but we need resources to be able to do that. So the recent fundraising success that we've had that I alluded to has had a direct impact on endowment growth, but we really, really need to double down on endowment for a couple of particular initiatives that I'll share with you in just a second. So there is more to be done. Gwyneth, stand up. So this is Gwyneth Connell. Some of you have perhaps had the pleasure of meeting Gwyneth. If you haven't, I would encourage you to do so. Gwyneth is going to be our second director of the Grauer Family Institute for Excellence in Innovation and Education. Will be coming to us from, she's still employed by another school, Blair Academy, an excellent school in Blairstown, New Jersey. And Gwyneth and her family, this is little Juno, pretty cute little girl, and her husband Scott, and they'll be joining us this summer. Gwyneth brings a world of experience, some fantastic experience as an educator and as an educational leader, along with a background in improv comedy, which actually lends itself pretty well to the role that she's going to be serving in to continue to drive innovative change at Pomfret. So we are really excited to welcome Gwyneth, Scott, and Juno to Pomfret. But quickly, I want to talk about a few other initiatives. Again, things that started this year in what was supposed to be a year of latency. Graduation certificate programs. We now have a program starting this spring where 11th graders can pursue a particular area of interest, almost like a major. So they spend 2 years creating that foundation that I quickly referenced. And then in their junior and senior year, they can focus on sustainability, STEM, artistic expression and design, global citizenship, or social justice. And they can gear all of their coursework around one of these themes. And then they have an additional 80 hours of work that they have to do outside of the classroom to attain a certificate. They have to do kind of a thesis defense. And at the end, we're hoping a year from now on this weekend that we'll have a handful of seniors who are presenting to alums, sort of a defense. You don't get to judge them. Mr. Gibbs.
I'll just mention you might be exposed to 25 seniors next year. That's how many juniors have been in this.
I think it's a little safe to say, and Mr. Gibbs, feel free to correct me, that exceeded our expectation in year one. So that's going to be really, really exciting. And additionally, as Don spoke about yesterday, and some of you can see this and some of you can't, we now have 4 off-campus programs that are credit-granting programs. Lots of schools have off-campus programs. Not all of them grant credit. We have a program that goes to Morocco in June. We have a program on Hurricane Island in Maine that that happens at the end of August. We have a painting and drawing class that occurs in France at a chateau in France for 2 weeks in the summer. And then we have our Global and Sustainable Development course that goes to Costa Rica every year, all of which are now credit granting programs. So we're beginning to really shift the learning experiences outside of the walls of this wonderful institution. We do have to talk about our institutional priorities. I think I've referenced some of them. Some of the boxes have happily been checked. We have funded the Grauer Institute. So Gwyneth has both a job and some funds to work with. The Health and Wellness Center, if you haven't gone over to take a look, please do, and then compare it to the dungeon. Oh, I mean the old health center, which was in the basement of the main house, which is now both a great business office and the communications office. And so a few other things. The Pomfret Fund over the next 5 years becomes part of our campaign. This is, by the way, the worst kept secret in all of the world that we're about to launch a campaign. The formal launch will come in October. We're looking to renovate or replace the Monell Science Building. But these are the areas of the endowment needs that I was talking about. This faculty and staff compensation and professional development. I would not trade the faculty and the staff of Pomfret School for any faculty and staff anywhere in the world. And that is biased, I know, but it's born of evidence that the people we have working here are truly exceptional. And everyone is doing amazing work. But they're not being compensated sufficiently well. We remain below the mean and the median for ABOP schools, and even within our smaller cohort of schools that we look at relative to endowment size, we are compensating well below the average. So we want to work on that. We want to continue to develop funds so that our faculty, who have been so good about exploring new opportunities for growth and expansion of what they're doing, can continue to get the professional development they need. And then keenly and really importantly, this notion of financial aid. We have an extraordinary program at Pomfret School, but not everyone can afford it. And in fact, the percentage of students who are applying for financial aid goes up every year. The percentage of full pay students we have whose family apply for financial aid after 1 year continues to go up. But we really, really need to build resources that are directed specifically at folks who have not historically had access to Pomfret School. This is driven in the name of equity and inclusion, certainly, but for all folks who have not had opportunities to be a part of this amazing school, as a function of finances, we are trying to increase our endowment just for that particular initiative by $15 million. A significant dent, but still only a dent as we move forward. So we're doing well. This, we hope, will help a little bit. Day of Giving, this is going to be beaten into you over the next couple days. You heard about it last night. How many people got the email? I will not ask the question. I'll ask the question, but keep your hands down. How many people have responded to the email? Don't raise your hand. Don't have to. If you could, that would be great. 125 hours of giving. We're aiming for a dramatic increase in the number of donors from last year. And then there's this, which I can tell you is a rather remarkable place. And Mr. Malarkey, whom I'm pointing at, raise your hand. Bobby and Nina have offered their extraordinary place in Los Cabos at Las Ventanas, El Paraíso, and it is a place you want to spend 125 hours, I guarantee it. So if you give, you're entered. Unfortunately, you can give 30, well, no, that's great, give 30 times, but you only get one ticket in the raffle. So the Advancement Office has been working really hard on this. We have an ambitious goal, and we hope that you will support us. And so, wow. Pretty good. Questions? Whew. Jim.
You alluded to 40 new courses.
Here, could you just give an example? Because I know Don's here. Can you do
Don?
that too?
Yes?
Yeah.
What is? Could you mention one or two of our new offerings for next year?
Sorry, I was multitasking.
courses, yeah.
Sure. So in the science department, we are offering an advanced biochemistry course, a full-year advanced offering. So that's brand new. Tim made mention of some of the new initiatives that are already on campus but are being evaluated and tested and maybe even restructured. So our humanities, we're still under the hood there and tightening the alignment between our history and our English curriculum, in particular with respect to writing skills across those two discipline domains. And in the science department as well, we have forever been a physics first school, and now we are offering an engineering course to our freshmen called Science by Design. So, but for new things, our entire approach to senior English has changed for next year. So an advanced student here might take, and this kind of harkens back to the AP days, would take kind of advanced English 4, and that would be a year-long offering. Students that didn't do that, in the fall, they would take an intensive writing course, kind of a core course, and then be open to exploratory electives. Well, now our senior year has advanced and non-advanced offerings that are electivized in each of the 3 terms. And so our students will be choosing in the fall from 9 distinct senior electives, 3 of them that are advanced and 6 that are not. And that will cycle through the entire year. So our students have access to opportunity. One of the things that's really neat about that is if I didn't make the cut in the fall for advanced English, but I demonstrated that I should have been there based on my performance in the fall, guess what? There's now an offering for you in the winter, which is terrific. So it's in partnership with trying to build 4-year college planning for our kids and look at this roadmap. In the history department, you might know that in our humanities, we did it so well in our freshman year, we did it again in the sophomore year. And we stole from the junior year U.S. history and built it into our sophomore program. So this year, everybody and their cousin took U.S. history because the current juniors missed that. And it was a bit of a pulse. So now, this foundational element of freshmen and sophomores leaves us open to exploration in the junior and senior year. And so in our history and social sciences department, we have for the first time in my understanding for Pomfret School, we are offering a course in African American history and studies. We are also offering a course, a 2-term advanced course in Islam in the modern world. We're trying to take our history curriculum, which has been very European and American-centric, and bring it around the world. And one experiential learning opportunity that Tim didn't mention, in partnership with the History and Social Sciences Department, we leveraged March break, and we built a course, travel-based course, to examine the lasting impact of Western contact on the Americas, and we used the Inca as a case study, so we traveled to Peru for 10 days. So, just a taste. By the way, a lot of people say, I have 60K, can I come back? And the answer is, we'll take your 60K.
Can you give some examples of courses that you don't do?
Sure. So our Advanced English 4, as an example, was still really tightly aligned to a previous AP curriculum. So we got rid of that completely. One of the courses I'm super excited about that's in that suite now, so connected to City Term, which is done in New York, and that teaching methodology, we're actually building an English class that's all about writing about the place. And we've decided that you don't need to go to Manhattan or to the Bronx or to Brooklyn to do that you can do that here in Danielson and Putnam and Pomfret. And so we will have a small travel-based English course here, where that group will be on the road all the time, which is really kind of fun. So, yeah.
Yes.
For him.
Tim,
Good question.
if you take $62,000 and you multiply it by 8, in other words, 4 years here, 4 years at college, you're at $500,000. And I remember a conversation with you 6 years ago, where one of the ways of perhaps reducing this process is to actually rethink a connection between 4 years in high school and 4 years in college, so instead of adding up to 8, maybe they added up to 7. It strikes me that the cancellation of the AP program is a giant step backwards for mankind in terms of facilitating people's education here. Those who wish are able to reduce the number of years that they have to spend at college, or some combination of the two. Comments?
Sure. A couple of things. First, the driving decision to get rid of APs had to do with learning outcomes and our incredible dissatisfaction and what research has borne out about the inefficiency and the lack of lasting learning that emerges from APs. So in terms of what's best for our students in terms of learning, there's no question that moving away from APs was the right decision. And again, we were maybe the 110th independent school to drop APs. And since then, the tidal wave has continued. It simply isn't as good as courses that we can design. The second, in partial response to your second point, the second point about colleges, some colleges have woken up both to what I just mentioned, the ineffectiveness of the curriculum, and secondly, to the poor financial model for them, right? If a student passes out of all their requirements and can graduate in 3 years, they're losing a year of tuition. So a number of colleges, many, an increasing number, every year, are continuing to refuse to accept advanced placement credit. So Dartmouth College, last year, you probably read about, said, we will take no more AP credits. I don't care if you have 12s on your APs. You're starting in our freshman, whatever, calculus course. Yale did the same thing. And so, you know, first driven by my dissatisfaction, and then I think our faculty's dissatisfaction with the program itself, a recognition that colleges increasingly are moving away. But your point isn't completely lost, because there are still colleges that are granting credit. Students can still take AP exams at Pomfret. We're in the middle of APs right now. And whereas 5 years ago we may have had 80 kids taking tests, now we may have 20. Those students who want to pursue an AP test can. They just can't take an AP course. And we help them do a gap analysis and address the gaps that may exist to prepare them as best as we can. And we still see students who are performing well on AP tests, but we don't drive them toward AP testing. Yes, Paul.
Tim, can you give us a perspective on admissions and college placement?
Sure. I'm actually going to ask Amy Graham, who's our Director of Enrollment Management, to quickly touch on the admission question. And if you haven't met Amy, again, someone else you absolutely must meet. So Amy.
Hi everyone, Amy Graham, Director of Enrollment Management. I oversee the admissions office and am a member of the senior administrative team. As Tim mentioned in his presentation, as the price point has risen over the $60,000 mark, it has been an increasingly competitive admissions process. We did an analysis this year and we're pleased to report that we're holding in terms of the quality of students that we're enrolling here at Pomfret. It has remained relatively consistent over the last 5 years, but increasingly we've become recruiters, more so than an admissions office. My team of 8 are out on the road 12 months of the year, looking to find outstanding young people to consider Pomfret. As Tim also mentioned, families today aren't necessarily thinking about boarding school. Staying home, staying in their current situation, which often is a public school, has really contributed to this. In addition to the steep decline in the number of school-aged children and families that are having multiple children. So there is a new norm facing admissions today, especially for boarding schools, but we are addressing that through increased marketing and communication, heading out on the road, sharing the Pomfret story, and creating a highly personalized approach with students and families within the admissions process. We continue to meet our enrollment goals, our tuition revenue goals, and are thrilled with the students that we have here at the school.
I've said this before, but it is getting really expensive. If you were here in the mid-'60s, you were here at a time when approximately 50% of Americans, approximately, could afford to send their child to Pomfret without financial aid. That was in the mid-'60s. In 2019, that percentage is around 2. Yeah, that's what we're up against. That's why that financial aid number in our campaign is so important. Quickly, to get back to Paul's second question about college. Every senior is into college. Okay, so that's not a surprise, but that's not what you want to hear. We are finding great success in the college process. I think if you look at our college list this year, it is perhaps the most impressive list that I've seen in my time here. But what does impressive mean? We're not judging impressive necessarily by the same metrics that we always have, right? We don't go by U.S. News and World Report's top 50. That's not really a thing for us. We see success as our ability to find the best fit for a Pomfret graduate with their college. That is now largely the mindset. That's the mindset of 99% of all schools. Now, there's still some, who go to their fairs that Amy's at, and the only brochure they put out is the list of colleges their kids are attending, as if that were the golden ticket to a successful life. We are concentrating more on fit, and we find, I think that this year we've had the sort of the best outcome on that front, and we're sending some kids to some really prestigious and great schools. So it's a little bit vague. Happy to dig into it more after this. There's a question here. Yeah.
So I was going to ask more or less the same question that Paul asked, and maybe we could go into a little bit more detail in terms of course, everybody knows how competitive the boarding school environment is. There's so many great schools out there. So my question was going to be, how are we doing in applications, sort of numeric, statistically data, and acceptances and yield?
Sure. So I took over the admissions office in 2016, so just wrapping up my third year. Over the last 3 years, we've held relatively firm in terms of our number of applicants. At the same time, we've had a slight increase in selectivity as well as yield. What would be surprising for many of you to know is that students today have tremendous choice in the admissions process. Many years ago, a student would pick 1, 2, maybe 3 schools to apply to. And so yield figures were quite high at that period of time. Right now, in terms of our yield, about a third of the students that we accept choose to come to Pomfret. And we do a fair amount of research to understand why. And choice is a big factor. Many students today carry up until that decision point 6 to 8 schools. They will do 5 or more what we call revisit days, which is that final visit before submitting their contract and deposit to a given school. That has created an increasingly challenging market to try to determine yield, and knowing that these families, as we know that price point increases, have so many choices. We do a fair amount of survey research to hear why students choose Pomfret and why they may make a different choice. We are in a strong group of schools here in New England right now that share applicants. So when we lose and a student makes a different choice, often a factor is location, an interest in an activity that we might not have, say sailing. They are really impressed with the work that we're doing here, and we consistently get that feedback about the strength of our community, the steps we are taking to be relevant in our academic offerings. So feeling really positive about where we are on those fronts. Bringing great kids that can find success here and have outstanding college placement. That families, even if we are the school that they don't choose, that are going into their communities and sharing the good work that we're doing here, and time again saying, gosh, we were incredibly impressed, I can't wait to tell my friends and family who might be applying out next year. So I really do see that we're in a position of strength in a very challenging marketplace, and the different parts of the strategic plan are really starting to bear fruit. So I do feel that we're in a very healthy position from an admissions perspective in a very challenging market.
Thank you. The sailing anecdote is a great one. There's a student we accepted who's going to a school in Newport, Rhode Island, the second best boarding school in a 60-mile radius. And he and his family preferred everything about Pomfret School, everything. And we didn't have a sailing team. So he's going to St. George's, which is brutal. But Amy can't create a sailing program and build a lake right here. So power to them for finding that one passion. But everything else about the schools comparing, they preferred us. A bit of a puzzling decision to choose it just for sailing, but that's their choice. But that's what we're up against. Yes?
So 75% of the revenue is tuition-based.
76.
And that $14 million goal. What's a realistic target? What can we get? I mean, you're not going to reduce that to 50%, but if you had your druthers, where would you think that tuition could drop to and make Pomfret perhaps more affordable for more people?
So that's a really good question. There are a fair amount of studies out there about what it costs to make a difference. So just as here's an interesting anecdote. The most expensive boarding school in the ABOPS next year will cost $67,000+, right? And that's a very prestigious school. An even more prestigious school costs $10,000 less a year, $57,000. And that doesn't make a huge difference. People aren't choosing school B because it's $10,000 cheaper. So the delta really, if we were $5,000 cheaper than some schools, if you're a full pay applicant, doesn't make any difference. That's what the research is telling us. The delta has to become really significant, has to become somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20% difference before someone's going to make that the decide for a full pay family, before it becomes, but there are schools, who have $100 million, $1 million of endowment per student, whose tuitions are higher than ours. What? Yeah. And they're not offsetting costs with a $350 million the way that we're trying to. So it's a complicated paradigm we're existing in right now. Yeah.
Just one data point that you could add to this discussion, which is what is the percentage of students at Pomfret that are on financial aid, and how does that compare to our peers?
So about 42.5%, is that right? 47% of our student, I'm thinking probably back 2 years, 47% of our students get some aid, and that ranges from a full package to a couple of $1,000s. So the number's higher than we would like it to be. I host a conference of heads of school every year, and it happened here on campus on Tuesday, and there were eight schools. And there's one school that was a conspicuous outlier to the positive. They have 28%, and then the other 7 schools were all somewhere between 40, and there's actually one school at 60% of their students on financial aid, which is a really bad place to be, particularly because their endowment is much smaller than ours. Yes?
Thank you, Jim. I have 2 questions. One is, I'm paying $60,000 to send my child here. Give me, and yet you're saying that you're paying the faculty below the median, even though as exceptional as they are. So can you give me a breakdown in percentages of where that $60,000 goes? Second, all these programs that are coming in sound wonderful and exciting, but I'm one of the examiners of the American Board of Plastic Surgery, and we know that our pass rate is going up despite a consistent exam because the residency programs are teaching the residents better. So what metrics do you have in place to show you that your new programs are actually going to be superior to what you're doing today?
And that's why I referenced that this is an emerging area for us, right? An emerging area, an area that we know, and that Gwyneth is going to help us developing metrics. The surveys that we're going to be doing of our alums, all of our alums, but particularly young alums who have experienced some of this change, are going to be incredibly important to us. The trick is we're still perhaps a few years out in terms of our alums, the number of students who have been impacted to start getting good and valid, sufficiently broad enough input from those constituents, the people who are going through experiencing our programs, to see how it's working. We feel good about certainly, the improved way that we're looking at assessment, the changed way we're looking at assessment, but it's still too much anecdote and not enough data. So we're the position I spoke to that we've created for a part-time data person, and with Gwyneth coming on board, our intention is to continue to drive the question about how do we know it's working. Part of the way we know it's working, it's still anecdote, is that the feedback we're getting from constituents coming to see us is the noise around what we're doing is growing. The way it's resonating with educational consultants is growing. The excitement that our parent organizations, both the NAIS, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and the Association of Boarding Schools, have recognized us for the work that we're doing and have sort of called us out and singled us out in really positive ways. Still anecdote and not data. In terms of your question about where the money's going, this is where it's going, right? Students' sports services, which is technology, health services, food service, college counseling, front office. I mean, I can go through all of this. The debt service, we have $16 million of debt, and so we're paying down $16 million of debt. We have put our debt servicing into our operating budget, which is a much healthier place for it to be instead of drawing it out of endowment. Education, the classroom costs, that's the teaching faculty salaries, professional development, athletics, library services. The plant, I think, probably speaks for itself. We also, just as an FYI, we have a PRISM budget of around $800,000, which is about 33% of where it should be to address the deferred maintenance that we have. We should be spending about $2.2 million a year on deferred maintenance. We're spending about $800,000. That, long-term, becomes an issue for us. We have increased it annually, both in terms of dollar number and percentage. But that's a significant cost. Institutional costs are employee benefits. We have an excellent benefits package, legal, audit, and then insurance. And then administrative, that's me and my office, admissions, advancement, the business office, and communications. So that's how it breaks down.
How are you doing on full tuition foreign students? How's it changed over time? How do you compare to peers?
So 98% of our international students are full pay. The exceptions, occasionally a student from Canada, and occasionally we have small financial aid grants that we make to students from Vietnam, Thailand, no, just Vietnam in the Far East. So otherwise, 100%. And again, I've told this crowd before, we have, I don't know what the number is this year, we've had as many as 250 full pay applicants from China that's in a single year. And we're accepting about 4 or 5 of that 250. And if we did any marketing, it would be 3 times that. We've actually taken steps in the past 3 years under Amy's thoughtful leadership to reduce the number of full pay Chinese applicants we're getting, in part because we know we're only looking for 4 or 5, and 1/3 of our applicants in 1 year were from China. We're spending way too much time looking at an applicant pool that ultimately will be about 3% of the students we accept. So we're trying to shrink that number through a couple of steps that I'm happy to explain to people. Yes?
Would you comment, I don't know what other schools do, but I was just looking at, would you comment on the balance between the money spent in education and the money spent in, the office administration? I mean, it's just, both of them appear to be around 20.
Yeah, and this is why it would be great that my assistant golf coach was here. He'd be able, what's that?
They're revenue driving offices. They bring in money on the front end and the back end.
So, did you hear that answer? You want to?
Sure.
I was just saying, obviously the faculty are critically important to all that we do and the programs that we deliver. In terms of the office expenses, thinking specifically about advancement admissions, and those two offices are the ones that are driving revenue, either on the front end or on the back end. So you might argue that they're just as important in terms of maintaining financial sustainability.
Someone's got some music on. Maybe that's a sign that it's time for lunch. Thank you all for your time.